Hello and welcome back to my channel. So these are really getting really personal, these little YouTube videos I'm doing, but I thought today would be a great opportunity to come and talk about my postpartum journey because I finally got my period back after 10 months postpartum. So I thought it'd be nice to come on and sort of talk a bit about that. So I will show you my charts and what I've been charting, what I've been seeing, which I have found so fascinating to see what my body does postpartum. But I guess to give you a bit of a background of what happens for those that may not know, when you do have a baby, obviously you've got so much hormones going on, but when you are breastfeeding, especially breastfeeding, it increases a hormone called prolactin. Now, prolactin is the breastfeeding hormone, and it enables lactation, but what it does in terms of fertility is because of the constant suckling, because there's consistent suckling from the nipple stimulating this hormone to be produced to be able to produce breast milk, it actually suppresses the luteinizing hormone that is needed to then give that initial rise to stimulate ovulation. So it suppresses ovulation. There is still a bit of follicle growth that goes on, but not enough to get a rise in estrogen levels, which then is needed to cause that luteinizing hormone surge before ovulation. So yes, follicles are still sort of developing in the background, but they're not getting to a stage where they ovulate. When I show you my charts, you'll see that I had lots of appearance of cervical mucus, and it disappeared, come back, those sort of stuff. I think that really just shows, what your hormones are trying to do. Like, there's something trying to develop, but it doesn't get to a stage where it can sort of then ovulate and release an egg. Breastfeeding overnight releases more prolactin levels than during the day. So what some people might experience is once they stop breastfeeding overnight, their fertility may return because of that. And I guess it's also really important to know that everyone's journey postpartumly is different. So just because this is my experience, you might find that yours is different. So everyone is going to experience different things, because it also depends on if you're mixed feeding, formula feeding, whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but everyone is going to be very different. But then you're also going to produce all different amounts of hormones, and then your body's going to respond differently to, the baby suckling on the nipple and the hormone releases that it causes. So again, it's so different for everyone. So you can't compare. Don't compare my journey to yours. That's all I'm saying. We are all different. So for me, I found that it was really interesting that I needed to stop breastfeeding nearly completely. I'm only breastfeeding once a day now, but it nearly had to be completely for me to get my period back, which again, so fascinating, but that's just what happened on my journey. So let's take a look at my charts. I wanted to give you a sort of a little insight into what my chart looked like as I was charting postpartumly and while I was breastfeeding. And the thing that I found most surprising is that because of all those hormones, especially the prolactin hormone that does suppress ovulation and does suppress that LH hormone, I did see a lot of times mucus appearing and disappearing as my body was obviously trying to do something. Now, I was exclusively breastfeeding during this time. What happened over our breastfeeding journeys, I breastfed until about 6 months when Ren started solids, and I continued to breastfeed up until about 10 months when I got sick, and unfortunately my milk supply dropped. So that was what prompted me to sort of reduce the feeds and swap to mixed feeding with bottles and of formula, as well as breastfeeding. So at the moment, I'm still not completely solely bottle feeding. I still do one breastfeed a day, but this just gives you an indicator during this time. So as you can see my charting that I did over these months. This is sort of when I first started charting again. I was having a lot more dry days during this, and obviously having to be a lot more cautious during this time. But as you can see, temperature remained low, lots of different changes in mucus. So this is continuing on, obviously such a long cycle, 300 and something days. Again, you can see sort of my charting. I will point out that my phone broke. So this is during that time when I was getting my phone fixed, that I didn't have the Read Your Body app to be able to enter this information. So that is why there's a big gap there. But as you can see, that I started to get a lot more mucus appearing and staying. And the thing about charting, trying to avoid pregnancy, any slight change that you see in your usual pattern. So like I normally have quite consistent dry days. That's my basic infertile pattern. It's very dry. So any change in sensation or what you see has to sort of indicate a potential fertility. So of course, that's what I'm going with. So anytime I saw the tiniest little bit, you can see that I'm marking on my notes, very small amount, those sort of things. But that is still an indicator of fertility. So it's something that I chose to be extra careful about because, of course, at this time, I'm not wanting to get pregnant. So that's why you'll see there's lots of mucus there, but there was only very small amounts on some occasion. But that's why I was very clear at documenting that, so I understood myself what I was seeing in my charts and could interpret when, my fertility was returning. This part here, I have a lot of disturbed temperatures. This is when I got sick. So I had a bout of either it was gastro food poisoning, whatever it was. I was sick for 3 days, didn't eat, I was drinking. And if anyone listens to this, I didn't realize how much breastfeeding really relied on, the calories that you're taking. Yes, I understand now that you need to sort of input. You're burning so many calories making breast milk. So I wasn't eating enough in order to sort of make more. I was staying hydrated and I just thought that was enough, but it clearly wasn't. So that is when I, got sick. And then I got a cold after that as well. So I then had fevers from getting a cold too. So it wasn't really a great week that week. You can see I've marked my sick days, but that's when my milk supply started to drop off. And you can probably see from then that my mucus then became quite consistent as we transitioned over to sort of bottle feeding, that I had mucus consistently there a lot of the time. You can see some was a small amount, but as I was getting close to that ovulation, which you can see was on day 315, that you can see that I had quite consistent and marking very wet, lots of cervical mucus, watery, etc., etc., to the point then when I did get that temperature rise. And you can see I had a very short luteal phase, which again, this is what I'm finding so fascinating about charting my cycles, and especially knowing so much about my body now and then seeing it postpartumly what it's doing. It is quite amazing, quite incredible. And I have really enjoyed sort of seeing what happens. And I was really interested to see how long my luteal phase would be. And given that I am charting, I am still breastfeeding, it can take a little while for your body to readjust after having a baby. I think there has been sort of research and things that about 60% of women will have short luteal phases preceding their first menstruation. So I'm really interested to see sort of what happens after this, and if I continually have short luteal phase until I sort of stop breastfeeding completely. But I guess that is another factor in terms of we're trying to avoid pregnancy right now, that my luteal phase isn't sort of conducive for pregnancy. It is sort of, I guess, another protective mechanism, but I'm not going to risk it. We'll still be very cautious and go by the FAM rules in terms of trying to avoid pregnancy. But I guess that is another sort of protection. But I think that is going to be another benefit of charting, is that I can see when my luteal phase is becoming, is increasing. And of course, that then will come with increasing risk of pregnancy, because then there's going to be enough time to enable a pregnancy. I think it takes about 3 menstrual cycles for your full ovulatory sort of function, so that hypothalamus, pituitary, ovarian axis to sort of be restored. So I'm really interested to see what happens over my next cycles and see how long they are. And I could always do another chat to sort of let you know what happens. But, I'm not completely weaned just yet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens during that time. But yes, this is my example of my chart and why it's really important to chart, because then I've been able to see, you always ovulate before you get your period. So clearly I've ovulated and then had my period. But it shows that I've had a very ineffective corpus luteum. And again, that's probably very expected for first period back. So it can definitely take some time for your menstrual cycles to return to normal after giving birth, breastfeeding, whatever it may be. But to start off with, there might be lots of cycles where you don't ovulate, or you have an ineffective corpus luteum, so you're not able to produce enough progesterone, like you saw in my charts, to enable an efficient luteal phase. At the moment, I'm not wanting to get pregnant, but so it doesn't really matter. But if, say, that changed, which, I'm probably going to document sort of, over the next 12 months or so what I go through, because probably the next 12 months we want to start trying again, but not right now. But, eventually I want my luteal phase to be at least 10 days. Ideally, 12 would probably be the better number, but at least 10 days, because that means that the egg and sperm have time to meet, travel down the fallopian tube, and then implant into the uterus. So that is what I'm hoping to sort of start to see as I keep charting. So I can do another little update for you. Maybe we'll wait a few months and then I can show you what changes I've noticed in my charts since this first cycle, given that my luteal phase was only 4 days. So let's see what happens, especially because, like I said, my son Rainy is now 10 and a half months. I'm thinking that probably around 12 months is when we'll wean him to cow's milk. So that's when I am hoping to stop breastfeeding completely. So again, things could change a little bit after that. But I'm excited to see. I'm excited to chart. I'm excited to keep monitoring this and seeing what happens. So yeah, there you go. There's a little update on my postpartum journey. Yeah, so really fascinating. So hope you enjoyed that little update. And as always, sending love, luck, and a sprinkle of baby dust.